What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Allsmith Project. My next guest doesn't really need an introduction. He's a 10 times CrossFit Games athlete, 8 times on team, part of the 2014 team championship with CrossFit Invictus, and he's 2 times Masters athlete, finishing 4th just outside of the podium in 2019 and 6th in 2021. One of my favorite humans on the planet, none other than Nuno. Costa. What's up, man?
Hey, welcome. Thanks for having me here.
I'm excited to chat with you. This is round 2 for us. We had a really cool chat. We were chatting about it yesterday while doing some awesome bamboo bench press, but I think the last time I had you on was about 3 years ago, almost 4.
Yeah. And was I on before that or no? Was that the only time?
That was the only time you were on. We've had some epic conversations, in between that, before that, and whatnot, but it was roughly around the time when you first got Maria.
Yeah, when she was probably a year old.
Yeah. What's that been like so far, man? Like your daughter is now 4 years old.
Well, what comes to mind is I've kept her alive for 4 years. Every year.
Bravo.
Every year, I think I celebrate. I'm like, kept her alive another year. The longest relationship with a female that I've had.
Hey.
And it's an emotional roller coaster. Those are kind of the main, I think, takeaways. Mm-hmm. Just when you think you kind of have an idea what you're doing, you quickly lose grasp of that because it's constantly changing.
For sure.
It says, like in CrossFit, your plan prepares you for the unknown and unknowable. Raising a child is all about the unknown and unknowable.
That's one of my favorite things about CrossFit is just the transferable skills to life. You think you're preparing, and you are in some ways by being consistent, practicing with the variety of movements, energy systems, mindsets, the consistency of the day-to-day grind, case depending on how you're feeling and where you're at. But life is messy. CrossFit is messy.
Kids are messy.
Kids are messy.
And I'd like to think it's not intentional, but I take it personally sometimes. Like, why are you making such a mess?
We talked about that briefly yesterday, and the famous Jordan Peterson always talks about, first things first, clean your room and make your bed.
Oh, that's good. I like that. I'm going to teach her that.
Yeah, right. It's a cool one, though, because it helps organize your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I discussed briefly yesterday how it's challenging when, you're teaching her these things incrementally, but she's 4. And you want your house clean. You like the settling the night before, so the next day as a clean slate. But you're not necessarily in control of another human. And so you have to, figure out how to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
What's that been like?
Oh, extremely challenging. You kind of have to let go. Mm-hmm. You have to learn that you can't control another human or try not to. You also have to let go or accept a certain level of messiness. And you kind of just have to accept that it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. And you know what? A majority of all that stuff is not urgent.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I make it urgent because, like you said, I want it to, for me, I like structure. I like clean. I like, kind of having order. For me, that feels comfortable. And I think that stirs back to childhood when I didn't have all those things. Mm-hmm. So I think as an adult, I've created that in order for me to be okay.
Yeah.
And when you said making your bed and cleaning your room, that's one of the first things I do. I make my bed and my room is fairly clean. Mm-hmm. Haven't gotten Maria in the habit of doing those 2 things, but I would say on the most part, we're fairly clean. I would say 80% of the time. And I think I've learned to accept that 80% is good enough, and I listen to a lot of parenting books that sometimes good enough is enough. And sometimes it's okay if it's messy when you go to bed, if there's dishes, and it doesn't have to be perfect and not everything has to be in order.
Yeah. You mentioned the 3 words, let it go. That's a really strong phrase that I think resonates with what many people are attempting to do, but it's very hard to actually apply those 3 words consistently when you're just wanting something a certain way. And something that comes to mind that you've probably battled with a little bit is you are not your thoughts. The voice that speaks inside your head isn't really you. You are the one that hears what your thoughts are saying, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to me, like when you say let it go, is there a practice or is there advice maybe that you would give to other parents that are trying to figure that out?
Oh man, I feel like I'm a beginner at this. You know, I feel like even all the work in recovery only got me to this certain point, you know, like being sober for a good amount of time. But the letting go is something that you have to do on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, sometimes on an interaction basis. And I think a lot that goes into it depends on my state of mind, you know, depending on the situation, you know, like depending on my current mood and state depends how much I can handle and how much I can let go.
Yeah,
If I'm
that's
going,
very, very interesting.
if I'm going into it in a stressed state, it's going to be hard for me to let it go. For example, when we're trying to get ready for school and she's not listening. But if I'm in a more relaxed state, you know, it's a lot easier for me to let things go, you know?
What are some of the tools that you have in your toolbox to navigate your state? Is it waking up early? Is it a meditative practice? Is it maybe a morning shower or journaling?
Yeah.
All of it?
You name it. Like trying to wake up early before she does. I have a morning routine, so I stretch about 15 minutes before, try to take my shower before. Lately, I've also been listening to a podcast on conscious parenting.
Oh, cool.
While I'm stretching.
Nice.
So kind of combining the two. The journaling, something that has kind of come and gone. Like I've done it consistently, and I haven't been as consistent lately, so more sporadic. Listening to audiobooks is a big one, and then talking to other parents.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Talk therapy is huge, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like something that I picked up in the last few years when life's got a little heavy is just, man, it's so cool that we can just pick up the phone and call somebody.
But the phone weighs a lot sometimes, you know, and we say that in AAs is like sometimes picking up the phone takes a lot of courage because it involves you being vulnerable, you saying that I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, can you help me with this?
Yeah.
And a lot of times you have to sort of admit to yourself, whether you're conscious or not, that like I just can't do it alone, or I can't do this by myself. Yeah. And just the act of reaching out, like even just the reaching out in itself will take some of the power out of it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, you know, you can't you can't solve a problem a lot of times in your head, and just kind of getting it out of your head, whether it's journaling or talking to somebody else, will provide a different perspective.
Yeah, I really like that. The phone is heavy sometimes. And I found that, I don't know if you feel this way, but like I don't make the phone call and just dump my world on somebody else. I like checking in. And then it's like it starts with a little bit of ping pong. And then one of my favorite things to do, and this is great advice for some of you guys listening, I love asking, hey, I'm going through something kind of tough right now. Do you have the space to navigate this with me? And I have received, hey, I don't have it today. I'm too busy. I got meetings. I got X, Y, and Z going on. And there's other times where people are like, yeah, totally. Let's do this. And I got something going on too. So like after you're done, let me go. Or like you take turns back and forth. And I think creating expectations up front that way eases a little bit of the tension right off the bat, where maybe not the first time, not the second time, not the third time, but the phone gets a little bit lighter.
Oh, totally.
As you practice.
Mm-hmm. I think that's it's interesting to hear your point of view on that, because I think that's something that's encouraged in AA a lot. And it's interesting because in AA, you just call people to check in. And ultimately, if you're calling somebody in AA, it usually means either you're checking in or you have something that you want to run by them. It encourages you, like AA encourages you to speak to other people, because a lot of times our thinking is what got us in trouble. So running our ideas by other people kind of like helps you realize whether or not you're somewhat delusional or your thinking is delusional. At the same time, you know, it's still just as hard to pick up that phone.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it doesn't make it any easier.
It almost highlights your inadequacies. And you're like showing those to somebody else. And you have this subtle consciousness that on the other side of sharing those shortcomings, you're going to learn from it. You're going to be better for it. But it doesn't feel good. It's like looking at an open workout. You're anticipating like, man, on the other side of this, I'm hoping to be very proud of my effort, disregarding the outcome. However, I know it's not always going to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's heavy on the heart, but it is something that, once again, a transferable skill from the amazing CrossFit.
Totally. Yeah, I think the other thing too is like what you said, asking for permission. Because people are not ready or like accustomed to it.
Yeah.
Like you said, you can't just call somebody and unload on them.
Mm-hmm.
It is important to ask for permission whether or not they have the space. But also, like, that creates the back and forth, like you said. And, God, I thought of something else and now it slipped my mind.
We'll revisit it for sure. I'm sure we'll play a little ping pong, and it'll tinker a little bit
It'll
up
come
to your
back.
headspace. It'll come
And
back.
when it comes back, I'll let you know.
Totally. Before we jump into reminding some of our listeners about your story, man, you're 16 years sober. That is something to be so proud of and so cool. What does it mean to you when I say that out loud?
It's a little unreal, surreal, you know? I never imagined I would be sober this long. I mean, you hope, and you hope that it sticks, and you hope that that your life improves as a result, that you apply the principles. But it's also like the longer I've been sober, the more I've seen people pass away from it, especially during the pandemic. I probably had like 2 or 3 people that I knew personally close to that overdosed and died. You know, especially with fentanyl. Fentanyl's crazy right now.
Especially down here in San Diego, it's coming across the border just so rampant.
Mm-hmm. So when you say, like, you know, what does 16 years feel like? It feels pretty amazing. But it's also, you know, the program teaches you it's one day at a time. I don't feel like I'm in jeopardy of losing my sobriety. But it's also like I want to continue to evolve. And how I continue to evolve is emotional maturity, right? So it's not like I'm tempted to use drugs or go out drinking, but it's more about how I handle life, you know, and especially I would never try to become a parent if I hadn't had like 10, 12 years of sobriety on my own, you know, so that's
because they're watching, man. They're watching your every move, and they're going to mimic it eventually.
So that's, I mean, a huge blessing. I think when I crossed 10 was a big one, you know, like I've been sober a whole decade.
Yeah.
You know, and then when I was sober between 30 and 40, it was also like, oh, I was sober my entire 30s. Again, another decade.
Yeah.
Which was pretty eye-opening. You know, 15 was probably a big one too, but I think you go through a lot as you continue to grow and you're challenged in different ways. Your sobriety, it's more emotional sobriety rather than like the desire to drink and do drugs, you know? But I do know now why parents drink.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I get it.
I'm sure.
You know, especially I think the first 2 years, you know, after putting Maria to bed, you're just like at your wits, you know, I think emotionally, physically, mentally exhausted beyond anything. I mean, a CrossFit workout can touch on that, but that quickly passes. But there's nothing like arguing with your kid in the morning, trying to get him out the door, and then you finally get and drop him off, and your cortisol levels are still like high for another hour or 2.
Yeah.
You know? So like circling back to sobriety, you know, it's been the biggest blessing in my life. I found CrossFit about 9 months after I got sober.
Oh, wow.
So I call CrossFit my sober baby.
Oh, that's cool.
So I'm still a teenager.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm still learning. But it's been the foundation.
That mindset is so cool, though. I like the way you say around parenting, hey, I'm still a beginner. Even in CrossFit, you say I'm still learning. With sobriety, you say you're still learning. And it keeps the growth potential there. You don't view yourself as like this expert and like, I don't know, man, when I look at your resume, it's like this dude has it figured out. This guy's been to the games this many times. He's been on the CrossFit seminar staff. He's performed incredibly well at the gay games. You figured out how to be unapologetically yourself and share your truth, not just with your parents and with your inner tribe, but with the world. And there's a lot of cool accolades that, like, do you ever pause and just kind of self-reflect, like, fuck, I've kind of done a lot of cool shit?
Personally, no, but I have more because when people sat me down and did what you just did and kind of highlighted it, you know, like my therapist has done the same thing, you know, just to kind of appreciate what I've done, and like you said, pause and like kind of sink it in, and I think part of, like, I think I've been an overachiever my entire life, and it's to my benefit, to my success, but it's also one of the things that I could also work on, in the sense that I need to step back and enjoy it too.
Yeah.
So not always thinking about what I need to achieve. And like what's come to mind, especially in the last few months, is like, I don't need to worry about what I'm doing. I need to worry about how I'm being. And especially
like
for
that.
Maria.
Yeah.
Because if I'm constantly worrying about what I'm doing or what we have to do, then I lose the space where, how can I be present for her? And that's the hardest part.
I love that you said that. I met with a gentleman named Punacha Machaya, and he's the CEO of the Deepak Chopra Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
And he met me, and I was just being me. And he goes, Bryce, you're a human doing, but we're actually human beings. Think about that for a moment. Let that marinate. And let's try to get you to be more than just do. And it was like psychologically mind-blowing, because up until that point, it was like professional basketball, right into CrossFit, right into coaching, and all these things. It was like, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm curious your thoughts here, but I feel like a lot of people are loved for their function rather than just for who they are. It's like the world loves things and uses people, as opposed to loving people and using things. And I got to a point in my life where I was like, wow, like if I don't do, I won't be loved in return. And I'm curious if that psychology has ever crossed your mind a little bit, because despite now your psychology being very much like, hey, I'm focused on how I'm being, especially being a parent, but like you've also done a lot, especially these last 15 plus years.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I think like what you were told, I also need to work on just being more. Even my therapist, I think almost every time I go in there, he makes me sit quietly for just like 5 minutes, and makes me close my eyes. And you can feel the difference. Like literally I'll be sitting there, and then all of a sudden I'll just like, you'll see my shoulders kind of slump. And then like even my body sort of like responds.
Wow.
And then like, I just walk in there like full of anxiety. I manage my anxiety really well on the most part.
Yeah, you do.
But that's also, I had to learn to do that at a young age. I don't think I was aware of it until like probably the last 5-10 years.
It's a survival mechanism when you're a kid.
Exactly. It was so a survival that turned into achievement, that's now turned into, now I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
And now I realize, is it serving me? How much is it serving me? And could it be better? Could it be different? What if I took a step back and focused more on being? Because like I said earlier, yeah, I'm focused on it, but like I'm a beginner.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near like mastery or like I've got this, or yeah, you know what? Like I'm doing this consistently. It's like an ongoing process that I feel like I have to work on it every day.
I think that's the secret though, is maintaining a beginner's mindset. I think the moment you get to the point of the ego getting involved, or feeling like the accolades or the importance of the medals or of the outcome starts to weigh on our headspace, we think, oh, we've checked that box, let me move on to the next one. It's like that beginner's mindset is so important. And I love that you're going to therapy, man. Like I think there's a huge value to that. I've done it quite a bit in the last couple of years. And I love the third party asking questions that force me to really pause and reflect, because there are subconscious patterns that we develop that like, oh man, I didn't even realize I was doing that. For me, that's been like untangling the people pleasing tendencies that I have with coaching and with people and with relationships. And now like through some of those healthy conversations, I'm on the other side now of like, whoa, like that still happens. And I still like have those tendencies. They don't just go away, but like you said, I'm aware of them now.
Yeah.
Right. And they pop into my realm like, oh, I see what I'm doing here, and I didn't do it purposefully, but now I can recognize to make the adjustment.
Yeah.
What have been some of the major takeaways for you in your therapeutic practice? The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level.
I think that's really insightful what you just said too, because when you become aware of it and you can actually change it, that's when you're evolving, right? Because now you're creating a different habits. I'm in the process of becoming aware of it so that I can make the change. I'd say the biggest change with therapy, since we're going to go there, has been the childhood stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I think, like you said, I had a survival mechanism that got me this far. But the longer I go without visiting, revisiting, and unpacking and emotionally dealing with the trauma in my childhood, it's going to prevent me from having healthy relationships, emotionally stable relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's been the hardest part. You know, I've been doing more looking into that. You know, they talk about, you know, the inner child.
I was just about to say that. That's cool.
And so just having to look back at that is scary.
Interesting.
Because my childhood was full of turmoil. I mean, even, like, I'll give you an example. In the last 2 years, 3 years maybe, when Maria was born, you know, I went to visit my dad. And, you know, she was fairly young, probably a year, maybe a year and a half. And I found out that when I was a year and a half, we were put in an orphanage. And I didn't know about it.
Oh, wow.
I didn't find out until like 2 years ago. And so my mom had her psychotic breakdown. And it was the first time, and my dad was left with 2 kids. My dad was probably 20, 21. So we ended up living in, an orphanage with nuns for like a year and a half, 2 years. So I think from a year and a half to 3. And what's interesting is, like, I don't remember much of my childhood, but having a child, you relive your childhood.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And what you have to think about, and this is like some of the insights that I've had from therapy, is she's going through probably what you were going through, or what you were experiencing her going through is what you went through at that age. So, you know, we were in an orphanage when we were like 10, and I knew that. I was aware, I remembered, but I wasn't aware that we had that period of our life when I was much younger that we experienced that. And I can't imagine, like, Maria being exposed to that.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, you know, and here's how I've justified it. My dad did the best he could, you know, and as a parent now, it's hard to grasp and not like feel anger and frustration over the situation, but also just like, okay, I have to deal with this.
Yeah.
You know, and I have to sort of wrap my head around the emotions that come with it and let it go in a certain way. I have to forgive. And that's the hardest part, is to forgive.
Yeah, for sure.
Both myself, you know, for not dealing with it for years, but also my dad and my mom.
Yeah. What do you think about this? I love who you are now. I mean, there's a reason why you and I gravitate towards each other at the gym and work out and can talk about this stuff. I might even argue, without all of the challenging things of your past and my past, we're not actually who we are right now. What are your thoughts when you hear something like that?
So we're not who we are right now?
Yeah. Like, it took those challenging experiences to formulate your mind, your body, and all of the experiences that came afterward to lead you to the now and to the amazing resume of experiences that are inclusive of your now.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if we're not who we are now, then what are we?
Interesting.
What are we, or what makes us, you know? And that's another question you can ask. Who are we? I mean, that's a question you could probably constantly ask for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that changes. Changes every 3 months, 6 months, every day too. Who I am tomorrow is going to be different than I am today because of the conversation that we're having here, as well as the interactions and experiences that we'll have throughout the day.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I always think about that when coaching. Like, the X's and O's of program design are tough because it's tough to predict humans. Like, humans are such malleable creatures. And I love that you said, who are we now? Because at the beginning of the documentary that we chatted about, and if you guys haven't seen it, check out the Nuno Costa documentary on YouTube. It's fantastic. It came out about 7 years ago and documents some of Nuno's amazing past and how he won the 2014 CrossFit Games with CrossFit Invictus, and so many amazing accomplishments and just great testimonials from so many of his teammates at that time. I get to have some background shots too, so if you want to check that out, it's fun.
I think this is when we were training at Point Loma, wasn't it?
Yep. And the thing that's funny to me is that was the question that Tori asked. He was the documentary filmmaker of that. And he said, when I say Nuno, what comes to mind? And I remember Lauren going, oh man, that's a heavy question. And then you said the same thing, like, oh, that's a tough question. And then E.C. Sinkowski hops on. I just had her on the show, I don't know, a month or so ago.
Cool.
She's amazing. And she goes, Nuno's this amazing combination of like aggressively holding you accountable, but also gentle and meeting you where you're at. And that to me summarizes like, hey, there's two ends of the spectrum of coaching and caring for people. And the answer is somewhere in the middle.
Totally.
And you're understanding that like, hey, some people need tough love. Maria's going to need tough love sometimes. But then other times there's that hug and that nurturing and that like more empathy and compassion. And it's this toggling and push and pull in between the two of those. And when I heard that, I was like, dang, that's perfect.
Yeah. I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I agree.
And I get to practice that in many different areas. What's interesting is like that shows up when I'm coaching, when I'm training, working out, and then when I'm parenting too.
Yeah.
I could give you different examples of all of those characters, like aggressive, tough love, but also like being caring and nurturing.
Let's jump into that. I want to hear about that a little bit because I've gotten to see you be like sassy Nuno, like jumping on people for, poor personal choices or lack of communication or showing up late, which we all need that, right? There needs to be a standard. If there's no standard, then it's like there's no rules.
Yeah.
And I heard it described perfectly around, basketball where it's like, okay, if there's no parameters around the court, the hoop height can change, the ball size can change, fouling can change. There's no rules. You don't even have to dribble. You can just run around. It's like the sport's not the sport anymore because it's constantly just cluster.
Yeah.
Like it's a really interesting thought process. So in your mind, you're very well experienced now with CrossFit seminar staff. You've been coaching for 17 years? Really long time.
I've been coaching since 2008.
Okay.
It'll be 18 years. Is that right? Am I
Yeah.
doing the math right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
That's a long time, man.
It is. It's crazy.
Wow, that's really cool. In your 18 years, man,
Yeah.
when we think about like holding people accountable and holding the standard, we'll start on that end of the spectrum,
Okay.
and then we'll work towards empathy.
Yeah.
What are some of the experiences that come to mind, or maybe what are some of the coaching intangibles that you like to think about and share?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things, because I would like to say that's one of the things that I do really well is holding people accountable. And yet at the same time, it's one of the hardest things because I think at times I was more invested in people than they were invested in themselves. Meaning like I was and I was married to their goals, right? And then I also, my self-worth or my success as a coach depended on whether or not they were getting results. And when they weren't getting results, I would interpret that as I was a failure.
Yeah.
And I actually had a good conversation with somebody a few years ago, and I still remember it because it was during the pandemic. And I had probably 5-7 nutrition clients, and I was I feel like they're not getting anywhere at times. And you know what he told me? He's just the time with you is invaluable. You can't put a price on that. It's priceless. Regardless
That's
whether
reassuring.
or not, they're getting results outside the gym or the scales moving or the body fat, is what they're learning from you, and your ability to listen is second to none. And I really, that really helped me, wrap my head around it. At the same time, there's been instances, and you're always going to remember the failures. There's been instances with like seminars, especially with level 2s. You've done your level 2.
Yeah.
And the level 2 is all about giving feedback.
Yeah.
And
it's very engaging.
Very engaging. And the more I've done it, the more I've learned to do it eloquently.
Ooh.
Yeah. And even last month, we got an opportunity to do a small gathering for the California and Pacific Northwest gathering, and we worked a lot on the soft skills. And
how would you quantify those, or what does soft skills mean for people that don't know?
Yeah, like your delivery, your ability to read a room, your ability to, holding people accountable, but without necessarily making them feel like they failed or they were wrong, but yet kind of holding the standard.
And then how would you categorize like a hard skill?
Hard skill is like, okay, this is kind of pass or fail, like there's no sort of like
you got to know the points of performance of squat, press, and
correct.
deadlift, that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So in terms of the holding people accountable, I still think it's one of the hardest things that we do as coaches, because the hard part is how do we impact what they do outside the gym? Mm-hmm. And we don't have any control over that.
Yeah.
And again, like you can lead a horse to water, and ultimately, like you kind of like whether they drink the water or not is not up to you. But that's hard because as a coach,
really hard, man.
How do we determine our success, our value is by their results, their success, right? And if they're not seeing success, then we kind of interpret that as like we're failing. And it's right. Yeah, we are failing to communicate in one way or another.
Yeah.
So how do we?
I learned something really, really awesome from you. I want to say in 2017, I think I was navigating that same problem while coaching people, and I think I had some clients that were just going through personal stuff, and you said, Bryce, one of the best things you can do is just ask better questions.
Yeah.
And the first question is like, hey, how can I help, and do you want my help?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, like it's an assessment of habit. What do you have going on here? Okay, you made this choice to eat this thing, to sleep this little, or to, eat the bad thing or to drink the bad thing. Okay, what was the goal of that? Was that something you thought about? Or was it just I want to get a quick dopamine hit, or I'm out and I want to conform to the group? And it brings around really healthy conversation of like, okay, in that moment, you're feeling social anxiety around wanting to conform to the group. But you want your body, your mind, your bank account, and your success level to not be conforming to the group. You want to be a 1%er. If you want to be a 1%er, your actions can't be that of the 99%. Mm-hmm. And it was a really unique thought process for me of like, I think up until that point, I felt this cognitive pressure as a coach. Like, I got to have the answers.
Yeah.
And I think I've evolved now to, I got to have just unique curiosity to ask them why they're doing what they're doing and what their ultimate goal is in said decisions.
Yeah.
And I learned that from you. It's evolved a little bit since the course of time, but I think that's a really cool way to keep people accountable, and you're phenomenal at that. Creating compliance is hard, man.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't remember saying that, but it sounds like something I might have said, and it's asking better questions. I mean, it's a good reminder for me too, and I'm sure that's probably like why you've been successful in doing this, because you've gotten better at asking better questions.
Totally.
And I don't think you can fail at serving other people if your intent is to ask better questions.
Yeah.
Because what I realized, I think during the pandemic, people need somebody to listen to them. Mm-hmm.
And they want to feel seen, heard, and understood.
And that you believe them.
Yeah. How did you develop that intrinsic belief? We talked a little bit briefly around the challenges of your childhood, being now recognizing relatively recently in an orphanage a little bit. What happened after 3 years old? Were you reconnected with your father at that point? And what were some of the intakes that helped formulate your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember much still. I think people react to trauma differently, and I think I pretty much shut off most of my childhood. I have very few memories before I moved here.
And you were born in Portugal, right?
I was born in Portugal. We lived there until I was 12, and then we moved here. And I think around the time that I was 3, my brother was 4.5, so he has more memory of this, but he didn't remember that either, or very faintly. My dad had a girlfriend for a few years, and so they took care of us until we were probably like 9 or 10. And then my dad met my stepmom, and they're still married. They got married, and then they left us in Portugal. And so we ended up going to an orphanage. This one I remember between 10 and 11. And then my grandpa took care of us between 11 and 12. And then finally we came here when I was 12. So part of it is, you know, I have a few memories. I remember shitting my pants. Hopefully I'm okay saying that. In first grade, like literally first day of school.
Okay.
Imagine like walking around with shitty pants all day.
Yeah, that's tough.
And that's like one of the only things that I remember, you know. And then I remember going into the orphanage, and it was like one of those. And I think now I'm 10, and so I'm a little bit more cognizant of life. And you're like amongst kids that have no family. We had family, but yet nobody that would take care of us.
Yeah.
And so that was hard because you didn't feel like you belonged, and yet you were forced to be there.
Yeah.
And my godmother came and grabbed us on the weekends, most weekends, which was a blessing. And then after a year, my grandpa was like, these kids don't belong there, and pulled us. And so I remember living with him for about a year before we came here.
And he's the one, I think I've seen the picture in one of your homes. He looks very similar to you.
That's actually my grandpa from my mom's side of the family.
Oh, okay.
And he died before, I think, when my mom was still young. So I never got to meet him. But yeah, he looks very similar. Like we have very similar features. I think I look more like my mom's side of the family than my dad. My brother, I think, looks more like my dad does.
Okay. What was your relationship like with your mom?
I think it was really difficult, to be honest, because she was paranoid schizophrenic, so she was in and out of hospitals, you know, and so I have very few memories of her when I was a kid, you know, because she wasn't there for long periods of time. You know, I remember during one of her instances, you know, in a paranoia, you know, we were living with my dad, and she wanted to see us, and he wouldn't let her, and I remember her breaking, like, the window with her bare arms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know, and
was that something that almost made you feel like good in the sense that like your birth mom wanted to see you and spend time with you, or was it scary?
I think it was scary as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, as a kid, you have no idea what's going on. Like, you know, all of a sudden it's like you see this person that's not well, but you don't know why they're not well.
Yeah.
And now you want to see you, and she's like obviously in a psychosis, and my dad's trying to protect us, but you don't understand that either. And then all of a sudden it's like you see her bleeding, the window's broken. It's like, well, what just happened?
Yeah.
You know, and I think I was too young to understand.
Yeah. Were you ever able to have a conversation with her to better understand her side of the story?
Yes and no, not about that. I think as an adult, I made it a priority to go back and visit. So I went to Portugal. Like once I got into college, I just made it a point to go to Portugal like once a year. And I went pretty consistently. And then between 97, 98 until like 2003. And then I remember the last time I went right after I graduated college. And I remember it was the last time I saw her, and I remember it just felt like her soul had left her at that point. And she was kind of just grasping for reality. And that was tough because I was also not in a place emotionally to like even grasp all that. And I wasn't able to be there for her. You know, like I was too worried about what I needed in order to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, and there was also pressure from, you know, grandma to start contributing. And I just graduated college, moved to New York, and, you know, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And so it was just like a lot coming at me at once.
Yeah, totally.
And I remember that was kind of the last, you know, and then a few months later she passed away.
I appreciate you sharing that, man. Like a lot of people, whether you're close with your parent or not, losing a parent is never easy.
Yeah. I remember your dad passed away a few years ago.
Yeah. And I've never been the same since.
Yeah.
In both positive and, I don't know if I'd categorize them as negative, but just different. And it's just one of those things. That's why I was curious about the belief, because fortunately I really did feel like I could screw up everything and my dad still believed in me. Or at least when he was alive, I could have those conversations with him. And I do feel very fortunate to have tangibly and being able to like metaphorically palpate the belief. And it's something that I try to do with my friends, with my family, with clients of like, you know what, like I know there's a song inside you. I'm going to go tooth and nail to try to pull that out because I believe in your greatest expression. And I think there's something to that that's like, man, I got to feel that a little bit. I want somebody else to feel that. Like my curiosity is like, I think the optimal place to be for successful individuals is a little bit of like, I call it the in-between. You're running from, I don't want to feel what I once felt in pursuit of this thing that you want. And that could be success. That could be raising an incredible daughter. That could be, you know, real estate success. That could be peace, your version of success. And there may be various things in this category over here. But I'm just curious, like you developed this intrinsic belief and this bond where you and your brother were like, you know what? It's us against the world and we're going to figure this thing out. And you have. And it's so freaking cool to watch. You know, there's been seasons of life in the last decade or so where like you and I have seen each other every day. And then where we haven't seen each other for a long time. And I'm still a fanboy over here like, dude, the guy's still doing it. And I'm curious, like where does that intrinsic motivation, that fire come from to want to be like, you know what? I'm going to leave my footprint on this world.
Yeah, it's a good question. I honestly, like, as I think about it, there's two things that come to mind, you know? And honestly, I probably haven't thought about that before. I've always been very optimistic, you know, which has helped me succeed. And also, I think my successes have given me that intrinsic belief that I can do.
Yeah, we talk about that often on the show. It's like confidence is looking over your shoulder. It's that proof of concept that like, hey, I've done the thing and I've been successful here. So it's like I have confidence that I can do it again.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it. A big part of it is like the successes over the years have given me the belief that I can do these things.
That's rad.
You know, I don't think it was anybody growing up, to be honest. It was my dad or my mom or my grandpa. You know, I wish I could say there was a significant person, but ultimately I think it came from failures. And I think that was the second thing, is that fear of failure. You know, like the fear of like not succeeding will motivate me. I've always been one to create goals and sort of like push myself to succeed. So between those two things, I think they've allowed me to create the belief that I can do most things.
That's cool. Where was your first introduction to like competition? Because you're a little younger than your brother, right?
Yeah, I'm a year and a half younger.
Yeah, and like for me, I had little brother syndrome where I thought like, man, if I could beat my brother, I could beat anybody. And so I was always in pursuit of just trying to like beat him in like home sports and all that stuff. And, you know, I'm curious, like what was your introduction to like that level of competition, not just in sport, but in life? And then how did you ultimately find sports?
Yeah, I think it was probably junior high school. And my brother and I kind of went different paths. He went the surfer route. Yeah. And I went like the land sports.
Nice.
So soccer. And actually that was probably one of the things that had the biggest impact when I moved here. Because when I moved here, I was 12 and I didn't speak any English. And then shortly after, I think like I, you know, started school and started playing soccer. And again, organized sports. I felt like I belonged. Yeah. You know, and then in high school, my freshman year, I played soccer. My second year, I played soccer and volleyball. My third year, I even tried to play football.
Oh, cool.
That didn't go well. But I tried.
Yeah.
You know, and then my last year, I ran cross country. I played soccer and I did volleyball and track at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
I was trying to find any excuse not to be home. Yeah. Because my home situation wasn't great. And so, but also like sports gave me a place where I felt like I belonged, you know, and I felt like I could be myself and I could forget about everything else, all the other troubles in the world. And so for me, that came a place of acceptance, a complete acceptance. So I don't know if it was always a competitive thing as much of a sense of belonging, But I know that one of my inner traits is that competitive mind. I don't even know if it's mindset as much as I'm pretty much ultra competitive.
Yeah, it's a drive in who you
everything.
are. Move fast and break shit. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer. The zipper pocket is an absolute game changer. I go from training at the gym directly to meetings, running errands, or prepping for podcasts. The LSKD tribe has become true family, and we are excited to continue to develop our community. Shop now at lskd.com and use code ALLSMITH. We chase the vibe here at AllSmith. Let's all become 1% better every day. I have a funny story. It was actually my first time meeting you. Not my first time meeting you, but first time seeing you in a while. I had come down to Invictus. You and I trained together. I was kind of still applying for the job. I didn't know if I had the job yet. We wanted to see if we all vibed together. And then I went back to Los Angeles for I think another month or two to kind of tie up loose ends. And then later found out that I did get the job. But at that time, you had left. I think you had gone down to Brazil for a little while, mm-hmm. and you were training and coaching down there for a bit. And so I didn't really know you. Mm-hmm. I knew of you. I trained with you, but I didn't really know you. And then I remember you came back from Brazil, and I'll never forget the workout. It was like 5 rounds for time, 400-meter run, like 15 American kettlebell swings up and overhead. And I remember you and Rasmus just like going at each other, full on like cheating basically. The range of motion, reps. Yeah, bro reps of the American kettlebell swing up and overhead, like here, both yelling at each other at like, okay, if you're gonna cheat, then I'm gonna cheat. It just got lower and lower, and it was so fast. And I just remember the sprint on the way back of the last 400-meter, and you locking out the final kettlebell swing and dropping the kettlebell and just mouthing off to Rasmus to let him know that you whooped his ass. And I just remember it was so funny, and I was like, whoa. This place, there's like levels to the game of competition, and this place is just different.
Yeah, I remember that workout, and Rasmus is probably like the greatest teammate I think I've ever had, and I think I've told him that, because 2 things. One, he competes at such a high level, but also like, he makes everybody else better, mm-hmm. And he doesn't take it too seriously. He does, but he doesn't. Yeah. And there's never a lack of efforts. Like when you're on a team with him, he's going to die for you, and that's what I want to. Yeah.
I miss his presence a lot. Training with him made it a lot of fun. Like we'd be lifting on the same barbell, and when he'd go over to get chalk and it was my turn to lift, I'd take like a one pound plate. I'd put it on. I wouldn't tell him.
Oh yeah.
And then I'd complete the lift or whatever, and I'd let him know, hey man, I got you by a pound. You didn't see it. I hit it behind, whatever 10-pound plate, and he'd be so mad.
Oh yeah, he gets super competitive about stuff like that.
Totally. And just the other day, man, we just finished the 2024 CrossFit Games Open, and we had a really cool community gathering within the Invictus tribe this year, and nice. I participated in some of the workouts. We had some of our other athletes that no longer compete participate, and Rasmus jumped in. Yeah. On the last one, and it had heavy thrusters and bar muscle ups on the final portion of the workout. And I remember he finishes the thrusters in the first round. He looks at me and goes, with his Danish accent, Bryce, I don't know if I can still do a bar muscle up. And I was like, you got it, man. Like, just trust in your ability. Like, get up there and just give it a shot. He hits the first one. He goes, oh, I got this. And he hits 2 more, and he starts like boasting all day.
Sounds like Rasmus.
And it was like really comedic, and I was like so proud of him. He finishes the 7-bar muscle ups, and then he goes back to the bar, and he steps back. He's a little tired. He bends over, and I see blood just drip from his hand and land on his shoe. And I was like, oh shit, like that, this dude's like fully torn right now. And it's so cool in the midst of like, the outcome doesn't matter anymore. He's not trying to compete. He's just trying to give his best effort. But like in that moment, you're correct. He didn't take it serious, but he did. He wanted to give his best effort. He was willing to tear his hands in the sense of just like wanting to perform at his best effort in that moment in time. It's just so cool to see those accolades transfer into the next chapter of life. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's one of my favorite things is like the non-stuckness where it's like people still add fitness into their lifestyle. It just changes. It has a different meaning.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was just reminded of the year we won the games. Heather ripped her hands on Fantasyland, and it was the worst rip I've ever seen.
Yeah, and the bars were so hot at that time.
So hot.
And so holding on to those, it just tore her hand.
Her whole hand was just like shredded.
Yeah.
And I remember I gave her my grips so she could finish the workout because there were still 3 other parts.
Yep.
And it was just like, and she had to compete the rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
With her hand completely just shredded. You know, it just reminded me, and like, you got to do what you got to do.
Totally. And that's one of my favorite things about sport, about life, is just like strength through adversity. Who you become in the midst of doing hard things, sharing it with other people. And like you and Heather and Rasmus and Brian and Io and Melissa Hurley, you guys will forever have a bond now.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't even need to be verbal. It's just like we had that experience and nobody can take that away from us.
Yeah.
That's so special, man. Jumping back into your world, man, like what was that in between? Like a little bit of junior high you talked about in high school, like kind of finding your way with sport and not necessarily wanting to be home and really finding a tribe and this sense of belonging. And then you talked about going back to Portugal at the end of your college days. But before we jump forward, what was your college experience like? You ran track at Cal Poly, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I went to Cal Poly. That was my top choice. I had a couple other options. I went to Kansas, so a small school, I think Bethany. They offered me a partial scholarship.
Okay.
And it just didn't make sense to me. There was like one stoplight in the town, a small school. And I was like, I don't want to play soccer that much.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and then I think Point Loma Nazarene was offering me a partial scholarship for soccer, but it was really expensive. Yeah. And I couldn't pay for the rest of it. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. So regardless.
Beautiful campus, by the way. We've run a lot of track sessions over there, but yeah, $50,000 a year is pretty tough.
Yeah, I've also gotten kicked out of that track several times with my running club.
Yes.
Another story of the past. And then ultimately, Cal Poly was far enough away from home. It was the best state school. And I didn't have to write an essay. Because the UC schools, you have to write an essay. And I'd say English was still like, I didn't feel confident with it or comfortable, so I didn't apply to any UC schools.
Well, imagine if ChatGPT was around back then.
I just heard about ChatGPT. It's a AI thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I haven't actually used it.
It's an interesting thing, man. You put in prompts and you're basically trying to teach it to then spit out some of the information that you want. I don't know if that it would work for a full college essay, but it could definitely prompt you with a little bit of help.
I think somebody asked it to come out with 24.3.
And it did?
Some version of it.
Oh, that's funny.
I heard something about it. I'm like,
that's actually really
right?
Creative. I like that.
Yeah, it's like, what could it be? Like, here's the prompts. Yeah. You know, and it spit out a CrossFit workout, but I don't know if it's like even close to what came out.
That's super cool.
So college was probably like the best time of my life, to be honest, you know, because you kind of coming into your own, you know, independent of your parents, regardless of what your parents, how close or how distant they were. So I got to just really experience life, you know. So I got to, I played volleyball my freshman year on a club team. Nice. And then I walked into my track and field coach and told her I was going to walk on the next year. And she looked at me like I was crazy. I was like, yeah, okay, sounds good. You know, and I did. I walked on the next year. I almost got cut. And ultimately, I studied 4.5 years, and I studied international business. And I was going to do a major in marketing and theater minor. And then I ended up deciding to drop those two so that I could graduate early in the quarter system. And I moved to New York.
Oh, wow.
Because I had met my partner the summer before when I had a summer internship in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
So it was about 4.5 years. I loved it. San Luis Obispo was great. You know, I'm supposed to teach at level 2 in Santa Maria in a couple weeks, I think at the beginning of April. I haven't gone back to SLO much, but it holds a really special place in my heart.
That's cool.
Because it was like, okay, like I started to come out, you know, and I got to pursue higher education, regardless what I studied, like that discipline, you know, that has carried on with me you know, in my success in life. And then it just opened up doors and helped me see what the world had available, you know, whereas I think in high school, you kind of have a very sort of shelter or closed idea, or at least I did, in terms of what the world had to offer, you know, and then college kind of just, it was sort of like a peek.
That's cool. It sounds like you developed a little bit more of like an anchor, and also the confidence to just share your truth. You mentioned coming out, and there was a moment, I think, on the documentary that CrossFit did of you, where they asked Lauren Fisher, who is Nuno? And despite some of the nuance that she says, there is one particular moment where she goes, Nuno's just Nuno. And there's something I wrote down here that I thought was pretty cool, but your uniqueness is your competitive advantage. No one can beat you at being you. Be unapologetically yourself. Embrace your traumas, your life experiences, your scars, your goofiness, and whatever it is. The more different you are, the more unique you are, the more competitive and interesting you are. And I think there's a special component to that. And it sounds to me that that's where you developed the willingness to be like, I'm Nuno. Take it or leave it. I'm not going to apologize for my sassiness. I'm not going to apologize for my competitiveness. I'm not going to apologize for the traumas that I come with and that I'm learning and working through. And you found yourself in that moment in time. And it sounds to me that like you developed a little bit of clarity in the midst of what sounds like a little bit of fogginess early on in your life.
Did you write that?
No. I pulled that from a few different therapists that I've listened to.
That's really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I'm very fortunate.
You should send that to me.
Yeah,
that's really good.
There's some stuff over here that's cool, and I listen to Rich Roll. I listen to Chris Williamson. I'm listening to Jay Shetty all the time, and I feel like one of my goals right now is kind of being like a sponge. Find people that I look into, and then kind of pull parts of things that they say and kind of put them together. Add a little bit of my own flair. Yeah. But you mentioned a little bit of journaling helping you, and dude, it's been a godsend for me. I mean, I could go through these pages and it's not just podcast stuff. It's scheduling, it's client stuff, it's programming, it's emotions, it's brain dumps. And I really do. I say it on almost every podcast. Writing fills the gaps within our thinking. It gets it out of my mind and into real life. And then I can actually see it. It's not just like playing ping pong in my head. And so
that's a good way to put it.
I mean, it creates a little clarity, and things get in our headspace of file cabinets. Sometimes everything gets mixed and matched, and it's like, you know what? This is what I think about when I think about Nuno. It's like he's being unapologetically himself. And I heard you say once upon a time, you're trying to redefine what is possible.
Yeah, that's kind of like mission.
Totally. But when I hear that, I don't think, I think it's evolved. I don't think it's just about performance anymore. Now it's, let's grant others the permission to be more themselves, whatever that is. And I think that's probably, when we go back to the concept of belief, that's the best thing you can do for your daughter, Maria. Give her that belief and then be like, hey, whatever you want to be a good one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she's changed her mind several times. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But circling back to the journaling, I can't even tell you how many journals I have. Because I've been journaling since I was 20. And I like, I was looking at your journal. I don't like lines. Yeah. Because I also would do scheduling, or I would do brain dumps, or I would journal, or and for a few years too, I would also almost scrapbook it. Yeah. Like if I went to an event and let's say I worked for the Padres way back in the day. Yeah. So opening day tickets, and I would put it on there because it was something significant in my life at the time, and I probably have I know I have a whole shelf of journals.
That's right.
And when you were talking about journaling, I was also thinking I have discipline in a lot of areas of my life. And right now that's one that's lacking, in terms of teaching my daughter, man, I feel like she teaches me, and I was telling her the other day, because I think this is important to share, regardless of how much she understands. I was teaching her, I was talking to her about how she teaches me to be patient, to be calm, to be loving, to be like empathetic and, understanding, just things that I've become aware of that I wanted to share with her, regardless of how much she understands, that she knows she's by far my greatest teacher.
Yeah, that's really special, man. I think sometimes in our world today, man, the sharing of appreciation doesn't happen. I think what it is like, if people are doing good, I'm actually just going to let them keep being good and I'm not going to say anything. And it's only when something bad happens, like, now I'm going to talk to you about something bad. But then it creates the psychology and like the energy of like, people only communicate to me when there's a problem.
But even if they're doing good, you don't know how they're really doing.
Yeah.
Because they could be doing good and have all this other stuff going on in their life. So just because they achieve this, kind of like talking about what you said earlier, just because they achieve this thing that on the outside looks incredible, there could be all this other turmoil that they're currently dealing
100%.
with, where they can't even acknowledge or accept or appreciate what they just did. And
no,
I
that's
think
a really valid point. Yeah, that's a really valid point, man. That's one of my favorite thought processes is everybody has a story we know absolutely nothing about.
I think even just everyone has a story, and I think like teaching the level 2s, you never know what people are coming into the level 2s with, because that's more about interaction, feedback and whatnot. Yeah. And you're right. Everybody has a story. And going back to what you said, asking more questions, Chuck says, ask another question.
That's cool.
Ask another question.
Dude, he had an awesome video. Chuck Carswell. What's his role now with CrossFit?
He's pretty much the boss.
Yeah.
Without being the boss.
Chuck Carswell, boss man of CrossFit.
I think
HQ?
Seminar Excellence, he pretty much handles Seminar Excellence.
That's cool. I was doing a huddle with some of our coaches once upon a time, and they were asking about private coaching and what's the secret sauce? Is it programming? Is it the check-ins? Is it time allocation? Like, what's the thing? I call it gas. I call it give a shit. And you can't fake that. And you need to do it consistently. And like you said, like, you can't be overly married to the outcome because you're not in control of all of the variables.
Yeah.
But you can really instill certain principles to show people, hey, I really do care. Mm-hmm. And I want you to care too.
Yeah.
And it's this unique co-piloting of each other's journeys where, like you said, like, I don't have to have all the answers. They don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
But we can talk through them and move the needle in the right direction. And it's what Kirsten, one of our amazing coaches at Invictus, talks about. It's the art of coaching. And everybody has their own unique flavor in how they do that. But Chuck had an amazing video that he had. I don't remember where I saw it. I've tried to find it numerous times.
He's not on social media, so any video of his is probably going to be hard to find.
Yeah.
Because he won't be tagged in anything.
Yeah, totally. And that's what he said. He's like, care. Mm-hmm. And then when you're done caring, care some more. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, he clapped his hands or he did something like the back thing. He's like, care, totally. Care. I was like, man, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. And I just thought about that from a human standpoint. I thought about that from like a healthcare narrative. Mm-hmm. Man, like, you can feel when the nurse really cares.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's something special to that. I'm sure Maria can feel that. And going back to her being your greatest teacher, you were with her last night. I saw on your story, Taekwondo. It's so cute watching her follow instruction and like do the different modalities. What's it been like taking her to Taekwondo and just seeing her learn?
Yeah, it's been really cool. Like, her swim teacher is the one that like referred us to it. And, my dad did judo growing up. Not that it was like a factor, but what we had heard about it was to instill these values, respect, obedience, like listening to your parents, kind of just learning that there's rules in their structure. Because part of the challenge, like, I'm a single parent, and so I'm doing all that. And a lot of times, with two parents, you share the load. Yeah. Meaning you both kind of do it. Yeah. But when there's only one person, it's difficult at times because she's constantly kind of pushing those boundaries. And that's what kids do. Kids are meant to push boundaries, see what they can and cannot get away with. And at the same time, it's not intentional. They're just learning about the world. They don't know what the standards are. And so we've done swim, gymnastics, we've done soccer. And then so Taekwondo, when she turned 4, was kind of on the radar. And so it's been great. And she's been going twice a week. And I would say like the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've definitely seen an improvement in her behavior just outside, class at home. You know, I definitely don't parent the way that they teach there, but nonetheless, we can talk about those things, and it helps to have another source to sort of instill these beliefs and values that I'm trying to teach her as well.
Yeah, it's like what the famous healer, our good friend Heidi, used to talk about. Take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure, like, in her exposure to these different sports, you might see things like, oh, that's a really cool tactic. I'm going to take that. You might also see, I really didn't like that. I'm going to leave that, which is really great exposure for you as a parent as well.
But it's really fun to see her do the taekwondo. It's really cute. And they keep it really light, really fun too. But at the same time, they don't put up with,
What's the disciplinary and tactic for young kids? Like, how do they draw boundaries?
Yeah. It's like if they're not paying attention, they're going to be put off to the side, but it's also at the expense of everybody else. So the first day or two, she was kind of all over the place. She was testing. She was seeing what she could get away with and what she couldn't get away with. And at what point they put her aside, they made her sit. It's like, if you're going to play, the rest of us can't practice. And do you guys want to practice? Yes, sir. And then her being disruptive is going to impact how everybody else gets to experience the class.
Oh, interesting.
So, part of it is like, handling her disruptiveness and how that impacts everybody else.
Yeah, that the social interaction, there's an element of conforming and being able to like connect with the group.
Totally.
That's a really cool thought process. The other thing that comes to mind there is like, we saw it during the pandemic, social isolation might be one of the greatest forms of punishment.
Oh yeah.
Like
very much so.
when you're outside of the tribe and feeling isolated, I didn't really think about it until honestly recently, but it's like, man, you can make somebody face the wall, you can make somebody, carry something or whatever the physical punishment is, but it's like being isolated away from the group sucks.
Oh yeah. I think the pandemic really rocked people's worlds. Yeah. Everybody. I don't think anybody was like, oh yeah, I crushed that.
Yeah.
Like I was like came out on top. Maybe now that there's a little bit of separation, people definitely learned a lot from it. But in hindsight, it was really difficult, if not the most challenging.
For sure, especially in the fitness space.
Fitness, but also emotionally too, because I think people were forced to be with themselves.
Oh yeah. What do you think about that? Like, there's so much distraction now. I had the author of The Comfort Crisis on the show, Michael Easter, and we talked about that, how like so many people, like they throw their earbuds in, or they're drinking, or they're getting some sort of like, they're always like having to fill the space.
Yeah.
And it's very challenging sometimes to just like be with your thoughts on a walk. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too, listening to music or wanting to talk to somebody, or like wanting to fill the space within my day rather than just like sitting and being and thinking about, okay, what comes up and why, and just being with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge, right? And that's what I'm working on in therapy, even just taking 5 minutes a day to like just sit, and if there are thoughts, just acknowledge them and just let them be. But when I have done like the sitting practice for 5 minutes, God, like I just feel a little bit of relief. Not a lot. It's not like, oh, my whole day changed, but I feel like I can be more present for people, including myself, because I'm guilty of that too. Like we're just constantly distracted, like whether it's our phone or the things that we have to do, and ultimately that's taking away from things like what we should be doing, like journaling, getting in contact with another person, or really just being present for another person. Like even with Maria, I try to put my phone in another room, because I don't want her to see me constantly being on my phone.
Yeah. Simon Sinek, the author of Find Your Why, has a great talk about that. If I'm talking to you and I'm holding this, like, or whatever, like it changes the dynamic. You now realize this is a distraction.
Even
it's not
this,
number
like
one.
This is distracting.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I'm guilty of that for sure.
And he talks about leaving the phone somewhere else.
Far away. Totally. That's a really great observation. It's hard to practice consistently. I haven't quite figured that one out. Sometimes I journal, sometimes I play on the iPad or have different things as prompts. But something that comes to mind too, I've seen different thought leaders out there discuss the devil's advocate to what I just discussed, which is just sitting with your thoughts. and how action is kind of the antidote for anxiety. And that's a challenging one to like think about, but it's like our feelings don't actually dictate our actions. Our actions then come back and shift our feelings, which is why I think things like sauna and cold plunge, change our physiological states, talk therapy, getting in the sun, some breath work, journaling, those types of things. And something that kind of came to mind are you're not afraid of the future when you are moving yourself towards it. And that's us going into the gym to train.
Yeah.
Right? If you feel anxiety creeping in, use it as a trigger to lean into action, not just for stagnation. Do something and you'll feel better. And I think there is value to that. Like in the past, when I've been just really tried to be, it has led to just ruminating and just digging the hole deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I need to go do some laundry or get a couple wins today. And then we move things in the right direction. So totally. I do think that version of be can have levels to that game.
Without a doubt.
You know what I mean? It's a really interesting way to tinker with the headspace. And with you, man, like so many people in the fitness space, especially in competitive CrossFit, eventually get to the point where they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I eventually have gotten there where it's like, I still love CrossFit. I love being around it. Big fan of the sport.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to be a part of that anymore. As far as the competitive side of things, certain movements just don't feel good on my body anymore. The pressure does not have the same incentive for me anymore. Yeah. And that doesn't make it right or wrong. Yeah. But what has been the motivating factor for you to still want to be competitive? Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinyon Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinyon is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinyon's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinyon.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
I think it ultimately kind of goes back to two things. One is like a sense of belonging, and two is like the competitiveness of it. And then three is unrealized potential. Just kind of always like, what is my body capable of doing? That's cool. And it kind of goes back to redefining what's possible. You know, like my body continues to amaze me in the sense that like, how am I still doing this? Yeah.
What did you run this year at the Gay Games and the track event?
Oh, I ran I ran the 200. I was really like, I wanted to just go hang out and have fun. I was nursing a adductor strain from the Wadapalooza qualifier. I think I ran like a 24.95 in a 200.
Yeah, that's still freaking fast.
And it was the first time I'd ran in like spikes since Paris in 2018.
Yeah. Literally. That's still so fast. I mean, sub 25 on a 200.
I think I could have
at 45.
I could have gone sub 24 if I had trained.
Okay. I believe it, man. Yeah. I mean, it's also just...
And if I didn't have a minor injury.
I was going to say the confidence there of like really letting your stride go.
Oh, totally.
On the final straight 100.
Without a doubt.
That's for sure. How was it coming out of the blocks again?
It was, a little bit shaky, rocky, because like I just haven't practiced, and so like, yeah, I know how to do it, but you need repetitions and repetitions and repetitions for it to feel good and for it to feel right. But at the same time, like, it's more of a friendly competition than it is like, You know, I'm not earning any money to be there. You know, I'm not earning any status. It's more just, I want to be able to do it. This is my 5th gay games. And then Marie was there.
That's
So
so
she
cool.
was in the stands, like, you know, I got to experience that with her. You know, Lily got to come, and my friend Christopher got to come. And at this point, I've met a lot of the track people, so a lot of them know me and whatnot, and we know each other.
Yeah.
And so it's like, again, another community within a community.
I can't help but think about the timing of that. You said your 5th gay games. They happen every 4 years. That's 20 years, man.
Yeah, it started in 2002 in Australia, Sydney.
Let's jump into that real quick. I want to hear about that, man. What events did you run in 2002? Do you remember?
Yeah, I ran the 200, the 400, I think some relays, and I played soccer too.
Oh my gosh.
I lived in New York at the time, so I remember going to Australia. I had to fly, I think, through LA and then to Sydney, and I was there for like a little over a week, and it was just like crazy.
Yeah.
Because I was going back and forth between the track and the soccer, and it wasn't in the same venue. So it was in a different venue. I was playing with a team from San Francisco that I connected with, you know, online, and I remember I was out all night partying on Thursday night before the 100-meter finals. I think I ran the 100 and the 200, and maybe even the 400. I think I ran all 3.
Wow. What were you running in the 100 back then?
I don't remember. And literally, I probably had like 2 or 3 hours of sleep, and I'd been doing drugs. I was up until like 4 in the morning, got up, or like 7, who knows. And I remember my race was like at 10.
Wow.
And I don't even know if I set an alarm or if I overslept the alarm, but I remember like, oh, I got to go. Took a cab and got there to the race, like literally probably 10 minutes before they lined us up on the blocks.
Oh my gosh. So you were like the epitome of Dennis
bronze.
Rodman at that time.
I got like 3rd in that, in the 100.
Dang. That's wild.
Yeah. And I mean, I was 2002, so I was 24.
Dang.
We
We were talking about that yesterday. That's when I first met you, was when I was 24, almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
That's cool to think about, man. It's just crazy to me that you've competed in the gay games for 20 years. And like the times that you're putting up too are not bullshit times.
I was most proud of Paris. I ran a 52 something in the 400 in 2018.
That's badass.
I think
for people that don't know, like the 400 meter run, in my opinion, I mean the 800 is really tough too. That's probably one of the just most ballsy runs. That's painful.
Yeah.
The hamstring glute lockup, like the anticipation of that. You can't start slow. Like you got to come out quick.
Totally.
Open your stride on the back half, and then really start ramping up that final 200 meters.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's like it's a gut check, man.
Oh yeah.
And running a 52 is damn impressive.
Yeah.
How old were you in 2018?
I was born in 78, so I would have been 40, just shy of 40.
Wow.
Just shy of 40. I was 39. And I remember in the prelims, I ran like a 55. And I remember
3-second difference is huge.
I remember, like, you explained the race really well. And I remember how I executed in the prelims. And I remember I trained for this. I actually, like, ran leading up to it. And I couldn't break 60 seconds in training. You know, that's the difference between training and competing, right?
Yeah.
Just the intensity and also the atmosphere. And then I remember after I ran in the prelims, I was like, okay, I know what I need to do. I need to go out harder at the beginning and then see whatever I have at the finish. And I remember I went out hard, and there was a guy that was faster than me and was way ahead, and I tried to stay with him. And I was in 4th at the, like, 150, and I passed 2 people on the straightaway and came back and got 2nd.
That's awesome.
In the last, like, 50 to 100 meters.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool, man. I love thinking about that. I think it's important, too, to note what you just said, the difference between training and competing. Mm-hmm. And I actually think, in my observation, that's part of the reason why you've elongated your CrossFit career.
Oh, without a doubt.
You don't compete every day. You pick your spots really well. You might compete once or twice a week with yourself or with a time or with other training partners. And you do what I describe as pick your spots. Like, hey, today, you know, I'm going to focus on my ring muscle up transitions, or hey, my hands are a little beat up, my joint tissue's a little beat up. Machine work is my focus today.
Yeah.
And you've done a really great job of picking your spots. How have you maintained like that leash on yourself a little bit amongst a ton of people between the ages of 20 and 30, way younger than you, way less miles, full of piss and vinegar, trying to prove themselves and make it? How do you kind of keep that discipline on yourself?
I think just the reality. I'm not trying to compete with them. You know, I'm trying to compete with myself. And then also like my age group, I'm not delusional that I'm trying to qualify for semifinals as an individual. I did individual one year, I think 2016, whatever, and it was. And that kind of filled that cup, And then as a master's, I like competing as an individual. I actually like team a lot better. And I got to do Wodapalooza on a team of 3, and that was amazing. It reconnected me with the spirit of like competing on a team. And I think just, over the years, like you said, there's been seasons. I took last season off. And that allowed my body to rest too, in terms of training and volume and mindset too. So I did the open, but I didn't do quarterfinals or anything beyond that, knowing that I was 44, turning 45, knowing I wanted to be fresh going into the season.
Yeah.
So kind of always having a realistic sort of like goal / mindset / approach. And again, in the gym, it's easy to get caught up with everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
But the reality is they're 20, 3, and I'm 45. And so, if I can be within a certain like 10, 15%, great, and if I can beat them on a couple workouts, even better, and really the reality is like closing the gap, like you're going to be as good as the people that you train with.
Yeah.
I don't know how Ariel Lowen does it, training on her
how
own.
some of these people train on their own
Pretty insane.
Is impressive. And I mean, I think Vellner does a lot of it on his own.
Yeah.
I think
Sikowski too, probably.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of people that figure it out, and they have kids.
Yeah.
And life responsibilities. It's incredible the way they fit it in. And I think back in the day, Val Volberl kind of set the standard for that.
Yeah.
And I know it's talked about often. It's like beating a dead horse, but I still think it's badass. I mean, the days that I train in the gym and all you guys aren't in there, and I'm like trying to hit it quick before clients come in, like it's tough.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful to still be able to do it. But man, it is very impressive, the caliber and the level of intensity like you discussed. When we were competing together around the time of 2014 to 2018, kind of that little window, you could coach, you could go to school, you could have all these different things. And it's still possible now, like we just described with the 3 athletes competing at a high level, parenting and life. But the sport has really evolved where the majority of these younger athletes, it is their full-time job to train. Whether it's as a professional athlete or as influencers, like they're monetizing their career in some capacity, which buys them the time to hit 2-3 hour training sessions within a day, which is roughly what I see. It's about between 4 and 6 hours a day.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's unbelievable. What are your thoughts on that? Like you're seeing on one end of the coin, or of the spectrum rather, the enormous performances that are being put up, the times, the body composition, the notoriety, the weights that are being lifted, the times that are put, like there's so much amazingness of what humans are capable of. But we're also seeing burnout. We're seeing high-level athletes that competed as teens get to the point where they're like, I don't want to do this right now. The social pressure, it doesn't feel good. It's owning me. I can't live my life. What are your thoughts on where the sport is going in relation to like this full-time, I'm all in versus I kind of want to do a few different flavors of what life has to offer?
Yeah. I think what's interesting about CrossFit is that you can be like a full-time athlete or feel like you are, whereas like, let's say you're a professional volleyball player, you would probably train 4 to 6 hours a day, whether it's some conditioning, whether it's some hitting, whether it's some lifting, probably, or getting body work, all that would be included in a full training day. Anybody that's on a like professional team, they train every day, full day, and their training is going to vary. What's interesting is like, as a CrossFit athlete, you have to find other ways to like essentially monetize or pay your bills, whether you're an influencer, like what you said. But it does require almost like you have to dedicate yourself full time to train in order to compete, because you have to be so well rounded that if you do have holes, they're going to be exposed at some point or another, And so I think the hard part is that, most of us aren't fully developed. I think especially for males, our prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until we're 25.
Yeah.
And I think females develop faster than males. I don't know specifically what the data is, but from what I've heard, And so I think the hard part is females develop earlier, they reach success earlier, and I think burnout earlier as well too.
Yeah.
And I think the hard part is like as CrossFit, like, and it goes back to training versus competing. CrossFit is a GPP program. It's a general physical preparedness, and most people should be training most days.
Yeah.
Right? Not competing most days. I think when people start to burn out is when they start to compete every day, if not all the time, if not too much, and then it starts to lead to burnout. In terms of the competitive athletes, I think if they don't have the structure or the supports or the tools that we talked about, journaling, some of the things outside the gym to help balance their lifestyle, sooner or later it's going to catch up to them. And we've already seen a few instances.
Yeah, totally. What is something you did as a child that you no longer do as an adult? For many, that answer is play. RX Smart Gear allows for your daily workouts to turn into play and exploration. In my training, the Frevo rope gives me access to a versatile rope that I can take with me wherever I go. On the road, at the beach, to the park, or playing at home, RX Smart Gear jump ropes fit my needs. We at Allsmith trust RX Smart Gear. Their gear is always reliable and gives me peace of mind that I will have top-notch equipment to support my health and fitness journey. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use the discount code ALLSMITH to shop their latest cutting-edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. Dude, it's been awesome chatting with you and getting to unpack your story for people that haven't heard it before. It's cool to sit with, some of these controversial topics within the CrossFit space right now, just the concept of professionalism versus burnout versus trying to find that harmonization or that balancing point. Haley Adams, she was an amazing conversation that I got to connect with. It was kind of towards the tail end of kind of her healing journey when she was just like, you know what, I need to step away from the sport for a little bit.
Yeah.
Now we've seen Mal O'Brien do it for the second year in a row. She had a really cool conversation with Tommy Marquez, Lauren Khalil, and Sean and all those guys on Talking Elite Fitness, kind of sharing her story. I think she's living in Kauai now, kind of finding her way. What do you think about like the future of the sport? Do you think we're going to see more people stepping away? I think Tia's stepping away too this year. I don't think she's competing.
Oh, really?
I mean, I could be wrong on that, but I think she was battling a little bit of a injury with her wrist and just some life circumstance. And as you know, like it's tough being a parent and trying to do all this stuff too. Mm-hmm. So I have tremendous empathy for these guys that have a lot of pressure. They got a lot of eyes on them. I don't know exactly. I haven't watched her YouTube video yet, but I know Brooke Wells had something going on with her shoulder.
I heard this morning.
Yeah, and so she did. It was kind of cool. Like she did traditional kipping pull-ups, which is like that's where you started. Mm-hmm. Where we all started, and then eventually evolved that to butterfly pull-ups. But injuries within the sport, pressures to perform, expectations from sponsors.
Totally.
Always needing to show up to all these competitions. There's not really an off season.
And training sessions too.
Training sessions are a lot going on. Mm-hmm. Training camps, comparison with other athletes and the social perception. And then not to mention the sport changes like every other day. The rules change, the standards change. It's beautiful, it's terrible, and it's everything in between. As somebody that is deeply ingrained in the CrossFit space and somebody who's been a part of seminar staff, probably hears a lot more behind the scenes than I do. What are your thoughts on all of this? It seems kind of messy. I'm hopeful that it's going to come back around with new leadership. But what are your thoughts as to what's going on with the sport and the traction that it's going to have for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably have a different answer next year.
Yeah.
Because this year is the first year that they've separated everything, meaning the individuals and teams are competing in Fort Worth. Yep. And then the masters and the teens are competing in different places. I think Michigan and even adaptive, all separated from individual and teams, and I think it's for the sake of the sport in order for it to grow. I think the individuals and teams will continue to have the attention that it gets, My thoughts are, I think the masters and teens and adaptive will probably suffer a little bit, but it may grow in the long term, like they're going to include more people, which is great, because 10 was really hard. It's like less than 0.00001% of the population.
Yeah.
40 is a little bit big, like more realistic for people.
Yeah.
Even still a very small percentage. So I'm curious to see how that plays out, you know. I think they're also trying a community event where you compete as a team. I think a team of 3 at the
cool.
Masters. And I know Legends is putting it on. So I'm excited to see that and the possibility that after competing in Wadapalooza on a team of 3. And so I think there's always been change. I think change is inevitable, right? In anything,
Totally.
right? I think the hard part is there's no way for us to predict the future and no ways for us to really like know what it's going to look like or how it's going to play out. And I think they're trying to figure it out. And I don't think they have the answers either.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to continue to try things that are going to help improve or move the sport forward.
Yeah. It's so interesting, man. It's easy to sit on a podcast and complain about a lot of the different problems going on, but they're also stuck between a rock and a hard place, and there's seemingly an infinite amount of movements that they can play with. I mean, last year we saw the integration of single undercrosses, double undercrosses, pullovers, pirouettes.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be a lot of unique skills that are being implemented. Also, the freestanding handstand push-up has played a bigger role as well. And then you have the separation now. New leadership. Is it under Don Fall?
Mm-hmm. He's the CEO.
He's a CEO now. And like there was some volatility there from Glassman to, what was the next gentleman's name?
Eric Rosa.
Yeah, and he was coming over from Oracle. And there's just been a lot of change. It's been cool to see Dave Castro kind of back in the mix. I definitely felt like last year, like the excitement started to come back a little bit. And then in the off season, we saw some big changes with the title sponsor Noble. And now it's transitioned from being the Noble CrossFit Games to the Go Ruck CrossFit Games. What do you think about that? What's your relationship maybe, or your thought process around Go Ruck? I don't know too much about them other than I think I did one of the first 5 Go Rucks with the Valley crew.
Cool.
It was tough, man.
Yeah.
Man, it was tough. Mad respect for those guys.
Yeah.
Although a part of me doesn't like that they're selling the Go Ruck patches now, because back in the day you had to earn that thing. And that was a tough 14, 15 hours.
Oh, I'm sure. God, I can imagine that. I think Go Ruck has had, I wouldn't even know, but I think they've had their foot in the community for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, but like we've also evolved from Reebok to Noble, from Noble to Go Ruck. So, and I think nothing's permanent again, you know, and I think the reality is like Noble changes, you know, their needs and their goals are different, and maybe they just didn't align with CrossFit anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And so, created a space or a need for a new title sponsor, and Go Ruck kind of filled that need. You know, I think Jimmy Ledford is at the head of Go Ruck, and he was a big part of CrossFit for a long time. Yeah. You know, he had an affiliate in Aliso Viejo. I forget the name off the top of my head, but I remember I did my internship there.
Oh, cool.
Back in 2011, 2012. I beat Jason Kalipa in a workout.
Hey.
Asked Dave Craster about that.
Jason, we're calling you out.
Right? He got beat by the intern. He didn't realize how fit I was.
That's cool.
You know, and so, I mean, even with sponsorships, I think, like you said, the excitement kind of around CrossFit, like you could feel the buzz last year. I think we had more registrations for the Open this year, which kind of speaks to some of the work that CrossFit has done.
Yeah.
You know, what there's more excitement. Even like 15, 14 years into the Open, we're reaching levels where there's more people participating, which means we're doing a good job of portraying how this can be something that can save somebody's life.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of people that need it, you know? So when I think of the title sponsor, I mean, I think it's great, but it also, I also think about the CrossFit Games sport being one of the pillars, but what CrossFit does is so much bigger than what we see being sort of portrayed in sport. But I also love that sport gets people into it, because people will see it and they're like, I want to do that. Yeah. You know, I want to be able to do that.
It's a really good observation that doesn't need to be an either or. It can be an and.
They could work together, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think you said that very well. And I also, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't they have their affiliate programming now, kind of led by James Hobart a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think he's involved in that anymore. He's moved on to something else. Okay. But CAP, CrossFit Affiliate Programming, which is free to affiliate owners now.
Oh, very cool.
So that's CrossFit affiliate program. It used to be James Hobart and Austin Maliolo and Spencer, and CrossFit purchased it, and it's been CrossFit's product, I think, for the last couple of years. And they offer like not just the workout, but videos of the workouts, WOD briefs, weekly briefs, the warm-ups, the cool-downs, kind of all-inclusive.
Yeah.
So like even for new affiliates, that's a great resource. If you don't want to have to program, just use CAP programming.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think it's headed in the right direction, and maybe that's an additional value add. I hope so too. I really do hope. I mean, CrossFit's done a lot of great things for my world, for my community, for your world. And I think also walking is very underrated, as is rucking.
Sure.
And when you look at the ideologies that are combining there between Go Ruck and CrossFit, okay, maybe the intensity of the WOD is a little much for some people. But if somebody's on a journey towards bettering their life and moving the needle in the right direction in comparison to that sickness, wellness, fitness continuum, man, throwing a backpack on and going for a walk is rad.
Yeah.
Like getting in nature, rad. Throwing on a weight vest and doing it with a community, awesome.
Yeah.
And so I think that the simplicity is beautiful. And I do think there is going to be some synergy there that will hopefully enhance the health biomarkers of so many different people, which I really like.
Yeah, I hope, and I think I was reminded of the pandemic. Everybody was walking everywhere, but not very many people maintained it.
Yeah.
And if, CrossFit can do for Go Ruck, like what it's done for, like, let's say weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, great. Another great thing that people can do, you know, and outside the gym.
It's huge, man. And the other thing that I really love about this concept of walking, and this is hopefully a huge nugget or takeaway for people today, do walking meetings. Throw in your earbuds or your wireless headphones and do walking meetings. Hop on your calls. Rather than Zoom, like feel the energy rather than having to look at somebody seated at in front of a screen. Park a little bit further from the entrance to grocery stores and things like that. When you see an escalator, take the stairs.
Oh, yeah.
Like, find ways to just get movement in and get a dog or a child, and you're going to walk with them probably everywhere and have constant movement.
Or you pick them up and carry them everywhere.
Yeah.
Uppy.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Dude, you've done some really cool things. It's been fun to share these things and revisit memory lane a little bit. But where I want to kind of finalize our conversation today is your incredible ability to overcome addiction. That's not easy. And I think addiction is, we briefly talked about the fentanyl challenges. We've seen issues with big pharma. I most recently had, the episode actually dropped today with Dr. Sean Baker, who's the author of The Carnivore Diet. And I previously spoke with E.C. Sinkowski, and we talked about just a whole food diet. And you've got some nutrition backgrounds as well. What's been your finding within your journey of 16 years sober? You now have gotten to the point where you have the skills, the tools in your toolbox to understand good choices, bad choices, and maybe better choices. What advice would you give people that maybe have addictive tendencies? And where do they start? And what resources are available for them?
Yeah, I would probably say find some healthy addictions like CrossFit.
Yeah.
Just I think finding a way to like channel that energy in the right direction, like things that are going to be point you like to where you want to be. And the hard part is defining that first. I think if you have addictive tendencies or personality or addictive sort of like behavior, I think the first thing is like to recognize it and be aware of it, because you may have it and not even realize it. A lot of people have problems with drinking, they don't even realize it. Or sugar. Most people, I would say, are addicted to sugar. Even my Legends class, they admit it. It's like, I have a really hard time with sugar. Again, awareness is the first thing. And then the second thing is like, okay, what am I going to do about it? And the hard part is it causing enough pain for you to do something? Or is it something that's, it's not that bad? And I think the part of it is most people think it's not that bad. Or I've got this. And this comes like straight from my work in recovery. And the hard part is when you think it's not that bad or I've got this, you're never going to seek out a solution. And so unless you get in enough pain somehow, depending on what that pain looks like, then you're probably not going to sort of like.
That's such a good point, man. I've heard somebody talk about it. It's called the region beta paradox. And what that means is it's comfortable complacency, where it's like, I'll use a job as an example. I'm working that job, and within that job, it's not so bad. I'm making enough money to live my lifestyle. I don't really like my coworkers. My boss is whatever. I'm sort of fulfilled, 1 out of 7 days within the week. It's good enough. I'm not really going to go anywhere.
Totally.
And then all of a sudden there's rules, regulations, you get a shift in boss. They're putting mandates on you, and it becomes so miserable where you either comply,
shifts the needle,
or you're just like, fuck this, I'm out.
Totally.
And like, that's exactly what you're describing, where like, if you have an addiction and if it's just like, I sort of just like use this to deal, it's a vice, it's an altered state of consciousness. I can sort of make it work just to make it to my pillow at night. It's just kind of existing as opposed to living, but people don't really know the difference. They're just trying to get over the hump.
Totally.
And then there's that moment where it's like, wow, I literally am running out of money because I'm spending it all on this.
Sure.
Or I've injured myself, or I've hurt somebody else, or I'm neglecting my children, or now I just did a blood panel and I'm realizing this is affecting me this way. And all of a sudden it's like that level of pain causes enough disruption to hopefully create change.
Yeah. You need that disruption, until you have that, you're probably not going to be like motivated to make change.
Do you ever see that in training? Like, do you ever come across where you're like, I'm good enough at that, and you kind of neglect that a little bit and you focus on these other things?
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden it pops up in a workout. You're like, shit, I've been neglecting that. Like
a little bit. I'd say running. I don't run.
Yeah.
Hardly. And people are like, oh, you run all the time. No. And I went to the games in 2021 and I won the running event, but I also trained leading up to it. I did a 5K in training. I was like, oh, that's good enough. I don't need to touch that.
Lifetime reps, baby.
Lifetime reps, right? So, but like there are instances, like things that do come up and I realize, you know what? I am neglecting that. I'd say crossovers, like something so simple. Like I didn't have them. I've had to work at them to be able to even just do singles. I can now do them consistently. Yeah. But that's humbling, like 14, 15 years into it. And there's a skill that like, oh, like that looks simple enough. I should be able to like learn that overnight. It's taken probably a year.
I love that. One of my favorite reminders is because I'm sitting here at a computer a lot of the day, I'm always thinking about like posture support with my upper back and squeezing my glutes to kind of set the sacrum and make sure like I'm not closing my hips too much. So one of the first things I do almost every day when I go in the gym is 4 sets, 25 hip extensions, and 12 to 15 ring rows. And it's so interesting because the social or the cognitive perception of a ring row is that it's a scale from a pull-up.
Sure.
And it's like, man, dude, I get to like 8 and I'm like, oh,
yeah,
these are tough.
Sure.
And I really do think there's beauty in just touching on the foundational components of life, of fitness, of mindset, because they really do keep the sword sharpened when you need it most. Yeah. That's a really cool one that I like that you described.
I think circling back too, like I think Glassman talked about mastering the basics. And when you feel like if you've done that, start over and do it again.
Totally. Something that I want to explore with you that you do a great job of, and I actually have it written on my whiteboard in my garage. I have it written, do what you say you're going to do.
Oh, yeah.
And so often people love to romanticize like their goals, and then the actions don't align with the goals.
Sure.
And something that I came across here is keep promises to yourself. Your faith in your own word is vital. Build it up by starting with small promises. Get those little micro wins over the course of time, or maybe the low-hanging fruit. And say you'll get up on time. Say you'll ring your parents. But over the course of time, you don't hold yourself to those words. You start to lose respect for yourself. Right? So it's like when you say you're going to get up at a certain time, get up at that time. Sure. When you say you're going to call your parents, call your parents. And what are your thoughts in relation to that as somebody that's a pretty well-experienced individual in the world of accountability, but not just for others. You can do it for others because you first do it for self.
Sure.
And something that Chris Williamson has here, that's where I'm getting this particular piece. Over time, you can promise yourself bigger and bigger things. I really like that.
That's cool. Yeah, that's well put.
How does that relate to you, and how do you practice that on the day-to-day? Peptides. There's been a lot of buzz about peptides and what they can do for the body, skin, muscles, and health. What exactly are they? And do they live up to the hype? Your body makes peptides. They are strings of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. Peptide therapy involves using prescription-based peptides to help treat and manage a variety of health conditions to maximize performance. Peptides consist of 2 to 50 amino acids and are made naturally in the body to act as important signaling molecules for many physiological and cellular functions. There are over 7,000 known functions of peptides in the body, and adequate levels in the body are imperative for performing at optimal levels. Discover a transformative journey to optimal well-being with Livv Peptides. Livv Peptides offer a natural and effective approach to health support. Embrace the difference. Choose Livv for a path to vitality that prioritizes quality, innovation, and your unique wellness goals. My personal favorite is BPC 157 with thymosin beta for optimizing gut health, tissue regeneration, and healing. Head over to livvnatural.com and use code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides. That's LIVVNATURAL.com with discount code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides.
I think, like you said, like those small wins, make a big difference, and I think going back to like doing what you say you're going to do and be where you say you're going to be, again, I think I learned that in AA, because I couldn't do that before, because I just couldn't be true to my word, and I also realized that's something that I really value in other people. And if it's important that I value in other people, I first need to practice and lead by example too.
Yeah.
And it, for me, like that shows a lot about their character.
For sure.
Is
there anything in our conversation today, man, that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to discuss?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm most proud, I think, even like, there's two things actually, but nothing urgent. I'm most proud, like recently, like the Legends class that we started at Outlier a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Just seeing the impact of CrossFit to the 65 and older community has been really powerful.
What is that Legends class for people that maybe don't know?
Just, it's a CrossFit class. We do it 4 days a week, and essentially we take the workout of the day and we scale, we modify it for, our clients that are typically usually 65 and older. And we started that during the pandemic. And it's just like they understand the importance of it. They're super committed, and they even build a community outside the community. So they'll go to coffee afterwards, and that's cool. Just those bonds are really important. And the other thing, like we were talking about earlier, that I was thinking about, like when we're talking about consistency, it's almost like I've thought about, what are the things that are really important that I want to like be able to explain to people, and it comes down to like 4 things. I think nutrition is extremely important, recovery, like your ability to recover, sleep, okay, and then like breath work. Yeah. Like one of those things, like it's a table. If it's a 3-legged table, it's not going to hold up. Mm-hmm. All 4 things have to like kind of hold their place. Yeah. And usually when you're doing that, if you're doing it consistently, you're going to see results.
For sure. The breathwork one is huge that I've implemented. It's really hard. It's very hard, but an easy takeaway for people. I don't know if you practice this one, but I love just box breathing. Mm-hmm. And I love it to the count of 4. So 4-second nasal inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second nasal exhale, and then 4-second hold.
It doesn't work when you're stressed.
Interesting.
I asked my therapist, and he's like, at that point, I mean, that's essentially like, a type of breathing. I forget what he was telling me about it, because I was like, oh, I'm trying this. And it's like, at the level that you're at the point where you've experienced, it's too late for that kind of breathing. And I forget exactly what he had suggested.
I definitely agree with that, but I'd love to give pushback to him and ask, because I don't know why I picked the number 60, but like when something's going wrong and like I can get a moment away or I'm in the car, I try to like, mm-hmm. and it doesn't do that much, but it does something. And in that small amount of time, I'm focused on just the accomplishment of the 60 breaths and trying to have a smooth rhythmic cadence. and I'm not focused on the other thing. And I don't know, it is something that may not scientifically work, but my placebo mind thinks it does.
And it works for you. So who's to say that that's not right for you?
Totally.
You know, I do I'll try 10 breaths, breathing in and out of my nose. And that sometimes is challenging.
Yeah.
Because you get the thoughts coming in,
Oh, yeah.
you know? And so, I think there's not a cookie cut answer. There's also obviously a lot of different tools and a lot of different resources and options, and ultimately kind of what you just spoke to is like you got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, you're somebody that embarks on lots of different elements of life, which means you're going to interact with quite a few problems. And I'm fortunate to cross paths with a lot of the special forces guys, chat with them sometimes on podcasts, and something they love to say is all problems are solvable. And something that I was thinking about is most problems are easily fixed. 90% of issues can be solved by a good sleep, a glass of water, some breath work, a gym session, or a walk outdoors, connecting with the sun, or even a simple chat with a friend.
Yeah, totally.
And that's something that definitely comes to mind in relation to that 4 table that you talked about. Like some of these things are like maybe things you can put on top of the table that help support some of the ins and outs.
Yeah, maybe we could get somebody to draw that up.
Dude, we totally should. The guy from what's it called? Whiteboard Daily. Have you ever seen that guy's stuff?
Yeah, I think I did his level 2.
Really?
I think it was in Indianapolis, if I'm not mistaken.
Nice. Yeah, we've chatted a little bit on DMs, and I want to get him on the show because some of the things that he draws are so cool.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to see how far it's come. Dude, what's next for Nuno Costa? What's coming up next?
What's coming up next? Let's see. What's next? It's March, right?
Yes, sir.
Quarterfinals.
When's that?
About a month.
Okay.
Yeah. Age group quarterfinals and then potentially semifinals. Would love to go back to the games, this year. Also potentially expanding our house, know, so on the home front. And, with work, still continue to coach for CrossFit. And I coach during the week. It's kind of like, my bread and butter.
Nice. Pretty full plate there, man. Have you overcome any injuries in these last few years?
Oh, yeah. I had shoulder surgery in 2019.
How's that been, man?
That was the first major injury. I've had minor things. And it was right before Maria was born, so that was challenging because I was in a sling for 4 weeks, and she was born 2 weeks later, so I couldn't do anything with this arm.
Wow.
So I would hold her, and then do everything else with my right arm.
Yeah, that's
that
tough.
I needed to. Yeah, and, it's part of the reason why I had an au pair the first year, so live and nanny. So that was probably the most significant injury I've had in the last 15 years. Other than that, what else? I strained my groin in training or competing for Wadapalooza, the qualifier. Minor, but something that affects you almost all the time.
That's an annoying one that doesn't heal fast that I've noticed.
Yeah, it took
we saw
about
a lot
4
of that
months.
in basketball.
Yeah, so it was like in October. So it was like November, December, January. It wasn't until like probably February that I felt, okay, it doesn't bother me anymore. And even every once in a while, it still kind of like peaks in. Minor injuries, I've been lucky enough to kind of like be able to like avoid major or injuries that have taken me out completely from the sport. And I think it's also like knowing when to train and compete too, and moderating the volume and prioritizing my recovery and my rest.
Totally. As somebody that has just been an absolute staple and a legend within the CrossFit community, CrossFit space, what advice would you give to somebody that's maybe starting their CrossFit journey?
I think be willing to try, know, because I think part of like what keeps people away from trying it or doing CrossFit is like they don't think it's for them. But I think it can do so much good for a lot of people, and it also depends on what their goals are too. But I think most people like what CrossFit can do for them, not just in terms of fitness, but lifestyle and community, is what a lot of people are missing in their lives.
Totally. I don't know if I shared this with you before, but we briefly mentioned when my father passed away in 2018, we had that hashtag SmithStrong. And I always wanted to evolve that and make that about others' journeys. And so I was thinking about it about almost a year ago now. And I was like, okay, well, you're a walking testimony to overcoming adversity. And our tagline for All Smith is greatness is forged, not found. you've forged yourself in the midst of heat. And the term smith is describing somebody who's using heat and an anvil to make something really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And you epitomize that. So you've been on our list for a very long time, and I'm very thankful that we got to have you in studio and do this in person and share in each other's energy. It's very cool. And something that I really have been wanting to ask you for quite some time is, throughout your journey of overcoming the peaks and valleys of life and adversities, what's been the greatest advice that you've ever received? So you've crossed paths with some pretty high-level people over the last few years. I mean, CJ was a major part of your life for a long time. Is there anything that really stands out there, like, man, I've held on to that for quite some time?
The greatest advice, it's so hard because it's relative to where you are in life at the moment, you know? I think one of the things that I tell people and kind of goes back to is, like, try not to say the C word. I can't, you know, because that mindset, you know, that you're not even willing to try before you sort of gave up in your head, you know? And that's an advice that I give other people, you know? You got to at least try. You can or you won't. Have you tried, you know? So I don't know if that's necessarily advice that I've been given. I mean, there's a lot of advice that I've been given over the years. So it'd be hard to, like, narrow it down to, like, one thing.
Yeah, for sure.
To be honest.
One of the best pieces of advice that you ever gave me was after a disappointing performance at the 2016 games. And you just said, be married to the process and divorced from the outcome.
Yeah, I wish it was my original material, but I probably heard it somewhere too.
That's the thing, though. There's so many great quotes and things out there. And you know how I view them? I view them as like subtle universal truths.
Oh, totally.
I don't know that anybody really owns them.
Yeah.
We just borrow them for moments in time when they are most useful. It's like a hammer or a screwdriver. It's like, this feels like it fits right here. And whoever originally said it, thank you. Because you're allowing us to share these thoughts and these golden nuggets that are, you know, here and now, but eventually going to hopefully domino effect in a positive direction for others.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the goal, man. Dude, where can people find you?
In person or online?
All the above.
I'm coaching at Outlier about 10 hours a week, so you can find me there. I train both at Outlier and at Invictus. I teach level 1 and level 2s, most of the ones in Southern California, which is kind of cool. And then online, mostly on Instagram. I'm pretty much not on other social media platforms, a little Facebook, but hardly. Nuno _Costa _CF on Instagram.
Very cool, man. Well, I appreciate you giving us a little peek behind the curtain, sharing a little bit of your world, not just from your past, but from the recency of competing in masters and parenting and all the cool things in between, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
This was cool. Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with Nuno, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.